Right now, it appears that sighs of relief can be heard all across the United States. No doubt some of it's real, but I suspect a great deal of it is in the heads of journalists that have been on the brink of a nervous breakdown for the past 4 years. It's amazing the amount of fawning attention Biden is receiving for someone who at his core represents a return to business as usual, the exact type of politics that enabled the rise of Trump. Listen to this obsequious crap from CNN's David Chalian just before Biden's inauguration.
And the contrast on display tonight was so stark. I mean, those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America. It was a moment where the new president came to town and sort of convened the country in this moment of remembrance, outstretching his arms.
This appears to be a type of therapy for the emotional invalids that didn't understand why their narratives were not reflected back to them during the Trump administration. As for Biden, he's been calling for unity both before and after the inauguration, and who can argue with that given recent events? However, there appears to be a difference in rhetoric and action in the Biden administration. One of the big issues that Biden seeks to take on is COVID-19, specifically how to support people and businesses affected by it. Here was Biden's proposal while he was still president-elect.
Our focus will be on small businesses on Main Street that aren't wealthy and well-connected, that are facing real economic hardships through no fault of their own.
Sounds reasonable enough so far.
Our priority will be Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American-owned small businesses, women-owned businesses, and finally having equal access to resources needed to reopen and rebuild.
And then you had to go and inject identity politics into it, didn't you? Remember, this is the great unifier, Joe Biden. Another way of saying this is that we are going to prioritise everyone except white men. They can go jump, because
You're fucking a white male!
By the way, white men are the only demographic that increased their vote share for Democrats at the last election. None of this should be surprising, of course. Biden campaigned on it. I don't know what proportion of those on the left need to understand this, but if you just concentrate on helping those that are at an economic disadvantage without considering race or gender, you'll help a disproportionate number of minorities. Proportionally, more black people are poor and will therefore be assisted. This isn't hard. Of course, the exception here is Asians, who outperform everyone else in the US except for Jews. But that's okay, because that means they need less assistance because they're doing well. Apparently, the Biden administration just assumes that if you're a racial minority, you're doing it tougher, which I think is a little racist. And of course, if you're a woman, well, you're just assumed to be the equivalent of a special needs individual. You see, if you just concentrate on what is important, socioeconomic disadvantage, the rest will take care of itself. Nobody is discriminated against, and you can actually build a coalition around these issues rather than dividing people. Along similar lines, Biden has reversed Trump's ban on critical race theory infused diversity trainings, although Trump's order did not specifically call for banning diversity training or critical race theory. In fact, Trump's executive order was specifically aimed at banning the promotion of racist and sexist stereotyping. This is from Trump's order. It shall be the policy of the United States not to promote race or sex stereotyping or scapegoating in the federal workforce or in the uniformed services, and not to allow grant funds to be used for these purposes. In addition, federal contractors will not be permitted to inculcate such views in their employees. It's ironic that progressives lost their collective mind over this order when they spend an inordinate amount of time arguing against racist and sexist stereotyping, exactly what Trump's order was seeking to ban. And remember, the ban only applied to federal workers, not states and not the private sector. Just take a look at the definitions section of Trump's order. It bans the idea that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. The United States is fundamentally racist or sexist. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race or sex, and on and on. Instead of having a meltdown, the so-called progressives should have realised that this order would also ban the bogeyman of white supremacy. What the opposition to this order reveals is that woke progressives do want to stereotype people by their race and gender, because that's exactly what a lot of diversity trainings do. Not to mention that there is absolutely no evidence that diversity trainings actually work. As I've been saying on this channel for going on 5 years now, diversity, equity, inclusion is a giant grift. Equity is now the buzzword du jour for the wokesters. But don't be fooled by it. When you see the word equity, you should understand that equity equals equality of outcome. And how do you achieve equality of outcome? You have to discriminate. Substitute equity for social justice in this quote from Hayek, and that's pretty much all you need to know. However, what you are increasingly going to be exposed to under the Biden administration is a bait and switch, or a Mott and Bailey, where you're told that equity is simply equality of opportunity, but in reality, it means equality of outcome. Or as Heather Hying explains in this segment of the Dark Horse podcast, they say equity means both things simultaneously, which is of course not possible.
There was this Washington Post article from a few days ago. So I could just show my screen very briefly so people can see what we're talking about. Biden selects transgender doctor Rachel Levine as assistant health secretary. I'm going to read just the second paragraph before you give me my screen back. Dr. Rachel Levine, this is Biden's words in a statement. Dr. Rachel Levine will bring the steady leadership and essential expertise we need to get people through this pandemic, no matter their zip code, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability, and meet the public health needs of our country in this critical moment and beyond, Biden said in a statement. Quote, she is a historic and deeply qualified choice to help lead our administration's health efforts. End quote. Farther down in the article, we have her saying, she is not saying what she is intending to do, but she's talking about her work in Pennsylvania. She says, I am proud of the work we have done as an administration to address health equity and the work I have done personally to raise awareness about LGBTQ equity issues, she said. To which, I ask, which is it? You can't have it both ways. Here we have these two things right next to each other in an article, in a single article from Washington Post. Is this person going to serve all Americans regardless of demographic marker, or are they going to be working for equity, which explicitly centers these demographic markers and seeks redress for differences in outcomes? Which is it? Regardless of demographic marker, as Biden says, or focusing on demographic markers, as she implies? You can't have it both ways. Regardless or focused. Regardless or focused. I really hope it's regardless. Those are his words. Those are Biden's words. There is nothing in what I have found of what she has said in the past, Levine, the new assistant health secretary, to suggest that there is going to be any regardless here.
Exactly. You can't have it both ways. That is, if you believe in consistency. But as we know, the wokesters and the equity grifters have absolutely no problem with contradicting themselves. So strap in, because it's going to be a fun 4 years. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.